Okay, this is a preview of week 5 where you're working on your own draft. And I looked through a few, I haven't read them in detail yet, but I'm seeing a lot of good stuff. So I'm going to be interested to see how this experiment works. Because I'm seeing that actually you guys are writing with a lot of very active structures and with considerable level of clarity. So maybe we need to move faster through this material and move on ahead to another thing. But let me just try anyway, and here we go. So here's what I did was I copied the instructions into a document, and then I also copied, let me just bring it back up, a paragraph. Thank you, one of you, for with it. I just went ahead and took the liberty of pulling someone's paragraph in here. It's pretty good, and so the changes I'll be making are just to take something that's already pretty solid and smoothing it up even more if I can. We'll see. And so let me follow the rules. Put a hard return after every sentence so that each sentence is on its. Did you guys catch my mistake? There's another mistake. Why do I keep doing that? See, that should not have an apostrophe there. Its own. So I'm going to do that. So watch how I do this, right? I'm just going to find every sentence and put it by itself like this. And that's what you call an exploded draft. And see, I'd already copied and pasted this one paragraph into here. Okay. I may not do this whole thing. We'll see what happens. I think I said for you to do about half a page. It's probably a little more than half a page. It was, especially double spaced. It's single spaced. So right now here's which you can do for the purposes of the exercise if you'd like to save space. Okay, here we go. I do not know how this is going to do. First, I'm just going to read it, okay? Albeit many narratives do follow the basic structure, that there is a difference in literary narratives is that they have a susceptibility to stray away from the 6 sections of a narrative in several ways. For example, in Benjamin's Ordinance, there is no abstract resolution whatsoever, but the rest of the structure is there. The anecdote ends with, "For had she touched me with the match of her eyes, I should have gone up like a magazine." The story ends with a simile and leaves us wondering if he ever meets up with his woman friend. This differs from a natural narrative because literary narratives can drop out some sections or the structure of a narrative, or even rearrange it completely, thus making it seem more complex. Another tendency of literary narratives that differs from natural narratives is that they use more literary language. For example, it uses figurative language like similes and metaphors. Lastly, another difference between a natural and literary narrative is a different dialect that is used. In a natural narrative, the dialect can derive from the narrator and the background they come from. People with diverse backgrounds may have an inclination of using a different form of language per se. The vernacular can have slang or different vocabulary. For example, the use of y'all and other similar vocabulary. Although some people may argue that the use of dialect is not a contrast between a natural narrative and a literary narrative, because there are some literary works in which they use different types of vernacular to convey the story. But I feel as if they are using dialect as a literary tool as opposed to a natural narrative a person uses it because it is their natural way of speaking. Okay, yeah, that's quite a bit, but let me, you know what I'm going to do also? Let's see, I think I have it here. Let me see if I'm just going to put the original here so we can, oh, that's the wrong part. Well, maybe I'll do that later, so that we can compare them. But let's just jump in, all right? Albeit many narratives do follow the basic structure. Okay, yeah, I guess I'd never used that word, but I know people do. I guess I ought to learn to try it. It's always looked funny to me, but I'll keep it. However, I think if we're going to use it the way we do, although, we're going to get rid of that comma and put it over here. Okay, so what we want to focus on is trying to do what we've been learning in style, which is to use strong characters and strong verbs. So if we just were to mark our verbs, we would get something like this. Okay, I'm not worrying about all these little spaces and stuff. Okay, so so I'm okay. I'll stick with that. Although albeit many narratives do follow the basic structure, and I'm assuming it says do because up here it was talking about, you know, that creates a sort of emphasis as opposed to some that don't. But now let's go to here. I'm going to just pull it down so we can see it. There is a difference in literary narratives. Is that they? Okay, so here, you know, this clearly needs some work, and so let's put our subject in there. Okay, and I'm going to say we can turn this difference into a verb, and we can do this. Albeit many narratives do follow the basic structure, literary narratives differ in that, I think. So literary narratives differ in that they have a susceptibility to stray. Well, that's a nice word, but guess what? I think I can take that have a susceptibility and change it to one word. Anybody know? Tend. They tend to stray. I love the word stray. That's a great word. They tend to stray away from the sixth section of a narrative in several ways. Okay. Now notice I want to point out that I kind of wish I'd kept the original sentence. I'll do that from now on, so we can compare them. Okay. Albeit many narratives do follow the basic structure, literary narratives differ in that they, and maybe we need to say differ from natural narratives, in that they tend to stray away from the six sections of a narrative in several ways. Okay, let's go on to the next one. For example, okay, so this time I'm going to copy it so we can see what I do to it. For example, in Walter Benjamin's ordinance, there is no abstract. Okay, what if we did this? Walter Benjamin's ordinance lacks an abstract and a resolution. And we don't need whatsoever. If we say there is, it's not there or it's lacking, we don't have to stamp our foot. It just does. Okay, so there. So what did I do? I changed there is no to lacks, and I got rid of whatsoever, right? I got rid of that. That's more or less what I did, okay? But the rest of the structure is there. Do you need it? I don't know. I mean, if we say this lacks, you could assume maybe that the rest is there. So it's possible we could just cross that sentence out. So we'll keep going. The anecdote, you know, I can see there might be a reason to leave it, depending, again, on context and things or what you're trying to emphasize. So that's definitely a judgment call. Okay, let's go on to the next one. This anecdote ends with, okay, again, I'm copying it so that we can compare it to the original. This anecdote ends, okay, we don't need the with. We can do without that, just like that. The anecdote ends for had she touched me with the match. And okay, we don't use the P, okay? So all you need is the number. And then we're going to put the, it's weird, but we're going to put, when we have a parenthetical reference like this, we put the period on the outside. So I'm going to put it there, okay? The anecdote ends, for had she touched me with the match of her eyes, I should have gone up like a magazine. Okay, so we didn't do a whole lot to that. Oops, I changed the original. I didn't even get to this one. Okay, so I changed that, but we can see now what I did. All right, let's go to the next one. And I'll try again, see if I can do it this time. And this story ends with a simile and leaves us wondering if he ever meets up with his woman friend. Yeah, here's where I would say, do you want to, that's a fine sentence. I don't even see any reason to change any of it. though, you mention the simile, but then you don't explore it. And so I'm not going to go into the time to do it now, but if it were my paragraph, I'd say, you want to go ahead and talk about that simile and explain it a little bit about its effect, probably. Because also, if you do that, you may find that you are developing more ideas. Like, is that a simile you would see in a natural narrative typically? Or is there something about it that already makes it more powerful and more literary? So I'm not going to go into it, but I would say, also, or do you want to put it there? If the point here is that there's lacks a resolution, then maybe you don't want to say that right now, okay? And because that's taking us away from the focus on this. So maybe I'm going to say, could we do this? Well, okay, I'll do it down here. I'm not sure how my system's working. Could we do this? This story leaves us wondering if he ever meets up with his woman friend, okay? So that's the point of the point. Your point here is that it lacks a resolution. And maybe because you mentioned it also lacks an abstract. I don't know. Do you want to also show that it lacks an abstract? That may be harder. How do you show a lack when you're writing? You could just say something about the story. Let me pause and think about what that might be. Hold on. I always have trouble with this. Why am I having trouble? Well, I can't seem to pause it now. Nothing's working. Wait, what does this do? Well, what I did was I paused and reviewed the story, and I would say that, or the little anecdote, which is on page 13 if you want to look it up, as he says. And I find what you probably could say is the story, if you want to mention the fact of it lacking an abstract, if you want to go into that, it would probably be because, you could say, well, the anecdote is so short, you don't really need an abstract for something that's so short. That's one argument you could make. So the point here generally is you don't usually want to bring up a point if you don't demonstrate it. So if you're going to say it lacks an abstract, you probably want to show that somehow. I know that's a little bit of a challenge because how do you show that something's missing? But you don't have to show it. You could at least say something about it, and then a resolution. So you follow up on the resolution. And so I'm wondering if we want to leave the thing in about the simile, at least here. Maybe we should save it for later. See, that's what I mean. Like here you could go, wow, there's an idea. Why don't I have a whole paragraph about how the difference between using fancy similes versus not. So then you could bring up this same passage later on to talk about figurative language or something. But for now, I'd say we want to take it out and keep us focused on the fact that you're demonstrating the lack of a resolution. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's keep going. This differs. I might stop this at under 15 minutes just to show you. Well, we'll see. Okay. This differs from a national narrative. Okay, differs. That's a great word. Okay, so that's great. Differs instead of just saying there is a difference from a national narrative, because literary narratives can drop out some sections of the structure of a narrative or even rearrange it completely, thus making it seem more complex. I can't really do that's pretty good. It's got a lot of good strong verbs. Can drop out, rearrange, that's a wonderful word. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's some way to, but I like the fact that the sentence ends on that point about greater complexity. Making it seem more complex? Well, I wonder what would happen if we just said making it more complex. I mean, that's making it more complex. Does it just seem more complex? I'm not sure. Maybe the complexity of the form is more complex, and it makes the story or what it's about seem more complex. I don't know, but so I don't know if you need the seem or not. Okay, couldn't do much of that. Okay, yeah, we can work on this one. I might go a little over 15 minutes.